Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish Therapist, a real-life therapist turned pop culture aficionado serving clinical interpretations and hot takes on all things pop culture. And today's episode is going to be a Real Housewives of Orange County catch-up. And it's a catch-up because Real Housewives of Orange County came back while I was on my vacation, which felt like it lasted about 4 minutes, by the way. But I'm going to do another episode just to catch you guys up about how it was, what I've been doing, plans for the podcast, etc. But the story with this podcast is while I was on vacation, I was doing episodes for Spreaker Supporters Club, which is kind of like my version of Patreon. It's, for people who, want to hear, like during my breaks, I will post updates and things like that, sometimes a little bit more personal. So I was recording an episode for them about the first 2 episodes of Real Housewives of Orange County. No, I'm sorry, the first 3. And I got this new audio equipment, which hopefully you can hear sounds amazing. I got some of the best stuff you can get and really did an upgrade for season 3 because, as I mentioned in the finale, To Infinity and Beyond, this is, the first season that I really feel more excited than nervous. I think I'm just feeling more comfortable, more confident. But anyway, what hindered that process significantly was I recorded a 1-hour-long episode of Real Housewives of Orange County, and upon listening to it back, after 5 minutes, the audio became corrupted in a way that I couldn't fix, and I lost the whole episode. And, so for me, it was just like such a gut punch because my content has never been an issue. I can create content all day long. In fact, I could do a daily show if I had someone to do the technical stuff for me. But for me, the hardest part is, the equipment and the editing and all that stuff that it really takes me, a long time. And it's kind of my least favorite thing about this. However, after that incident, I was so sad. I was so disheartened. But, the thing that I love the most about myself is that your bish bounces back. And, I was in my pool of self-pity for a hot minute. And guess what? I'm over it. So I'm ready to ride. I'm ready to, crush this. And let's do this take 2 of Real Housewives of Orange County catch-up. Except for the fact that today I'll essentially be catching up on the last 4 episodes. I will continue to cover Orange County, so I'm going to have some really amazing guests on to discuss Orange County as the episodes air from here on out, but please allow me to start giving my recap of episodes 1 through 4. So immediately I have to say the first episode was cinematic perfection. I mean, it made me so excited about Housewives in a way that I haven't felt in a really long time. I feel that, between the music and the cinematography, whatever it is you call it, visually, from content top to tail, it just seemed really amazing. And then, episodes 2 and 3 kind of were like, meh. And then episode 4 definitely came in hot. So I'm going to focus more on the most recent episode, but I do want to share, my thoughts from the beginning. The opening scene, for those who don't remember, because as of right now, there have been 4 episodes that have aired. Episode 1, the opening scene instantly reminded me of why I dislike Alexis. Alexis, she was on Real Housewives of Orange County previously. I forget what seasons it was, and forgive me, I didn't write it down. But she, to give everyone a reminder, she was on Real Housewives of Orange County for a couple of seasons when she was married to Jim Bellino. Now, Jim Bellino was an interesting fella. And when she was with Jim Bellino, Tamra gave her the moniker Jesus Jugs. And although so mean, it is pretty hilarious. So, sometimes I can find humor in things that aren't so nice, but it wasn't cool, but it's funny and it stuck. And it seems like this season, Alexis embraced that, which, if I'm being honest, she really had no other option, because for her and Tamra to convince the world that they are now buddy-buddy, they both have to pretend like they didn't hate each other so much that like, that's what's wild to me, how some of these housewives, they just flip-flop, like Jackie and Teresa, and it's just like, do you expect all of us to believe that this is like a real, sincere relationship? Give me a break. But either way, so Jesus Jugs is back, and that's the last time I'm going to say that, but my God, is it funny. So for me, the thing about Alexis that always irritated me is that she's so pious. She's herself as a human, she is ethically questionable at best and completely pious and also emotionally immature. So it's just like, she's one of those people who wears religion as like this badge of honor or courage, and then just like behaves like a really crappy person. And I don't understand that. So for me, that's where I have issues where, practice whatever religion you want. I don't care. And speaking of that, I don't understand why anybody cares, but apparently they do. Everybody thinks you have to be a Christian to be amazing. And guess what? You don't. Practice whatever religion, spirituality, whether you're agnostic, atheist, whatever. Do you. But my point is that we should all be free to, believe and feel, and practice the things that we want. But for her, she has always had this, like, I'm a Christian, I'm a great person, I'm always on the right side of things. And I just don't, it's like an entitlement, a false entitlement that I'm just not a fan of. So in the opening scene, we see Shannon and Alexis finally have this, like, meeting of the minds. And I have to say that Alexis completely escalated the discussion with Shannon, but I'm really proud of how Shannon handled herself. I think Alexis is behaving like an emotionally stunted teenager. And like, we're going to see that throughout the season, but especially in episode 1, she came in so hot and she claimed her goal was to be friends with Shannon, only to talk about John and Shannon loudly throughout the entire party. She's talking about their sex life, which, ew. And also, can I say, I'm so resentful of Alexis being back just because now we have to hear more about John Jansen or Johnny J or whatever personality he's concocted this week. I don't like people who are fronters and who behind the scenes are behaving very differently. So for example, Alexis is claiming her goal was to be friends with Shannon. So that's what she's saying. But then her actions are to talk about John and Shannon and to disparage Shannon in ways that it is in complete contradiction to saying you want to be friends with someone. So ultimately for me, right, people who have been listening to this podcast long enough know I have a superpower of being able to be a human lie detector, see through the behaviors or see through what people are saying, looking at their behaviors, and that's just kind of my thing. And so I just was like, don't insult our intelligence and say that you want to be friends with this woman, because she is clearly your storyline. Shannon and Johnny J are Alexis's storyline, and she was leaning in super hard, as evidenced by, we watched this flashback of Alexis's promised ring or promise ring or promised, it was like, you all know me well enough to know too, at this point that I cannot stand that semantic nonsense. So whenever we're arguing about semantics, there's usually something people are trying to distract from, which is the fact that they clearly did this promised ring post, which we all saw on social media, but we didn't know where the timing was in real life. And now we see it was the day that they started filming, which it's like, ugh. It's like, at least be interesting, or I don't know, if you're trying to be manipulative, at least do a better job. I just feel it's obvious that this is just all for the show. And I'm glad we got to see Alexis called out on it, but it was hard seeing how hurt Shannon is and was. But Alexis knows that this is her storyline, and she is leaning into it hard, like real hard. And it was weird because on Watch What Happens Live, so not only do you guys know that I will watch the Housewives episode, but I also usually watch the Watch What Happens Live afterwards, because usually it's someone from the cast going on and giving a little bit of more information and context. And so for me, when I'm doing these clinical interpretations, I really like to have all of that information. And Jen Pedranti went on Watch What Happens Live after that first episode aired, and she said she feels like John and Alexis are endgame. But in my opinion, Jen, I don't know if I trust her opinion or assessment or insight, because clearly we're seeing, this leads me into the next topic of seeing Jen, watching her talk about being, completely financially illiterate. And, it's a recurring theme across Housewives franchises that we've watched time and time again, these housewives living way beyond their means and experiencing negative consequences as a result. So I'm going to explain, for people who were confused, the Gina Jen, situation, and, kind of give all my thoughts on that. To summarize, Gina vouched. So Gina is a real estate agent. Let me say that. In addition to being a housewife, Gina really has an actual job. And Gina is somebody who I admire immensely, because she's someone who has had terrible, issues, DUIs, divorce, domestic violence, all this stuff. And she lived within her means. She lived in a casita. She got this job. In addition to being a housewife, she's not laying all her laurels on the fact of, this is my job as a housewife to be famous. And she is a hustler. And so for me, I think that Gina is the complete opposite of someone like Jen. Gina is a scrappy, resilient hustler, and Jen seems to kind of really be in this victim mentality of, woe is me, I don't know how to take care of myself or my 5 children, which, yikes. And so Gina got this job as a real estate agent, again, as a hustler, as someone who's really trying to build a life outside of housewives, because she's smart and she knows this isn't going to last forever. So Gina vouched for Jen. So they, quote unquote, I still don't know exactly what this means. So they didn't do a credit check, which allowed Jen to move into a home she couldn't afford. Okay, so this is super problematic, and I feel like this is what happens with people, why people go into bankruptcy or foreclosure on homes, is they try to get into a house that they can't afford. And so I'm confused as to what exactly this all happened, and I feel like usually when I feel this level of confusion, we're missing some puzzle pieces. But with the puzzle pieces we have, it seems like Jen's ex-husband, who before the show started, she said she wanted a divorce because she was with Ryan. And so he worked for her family's company, and it was really messy. But her ex paid her bills consistently in the past. However, he unexpectedly stopped payment, leaving Jen unable to maintain the monthly house payment of $12,000 a month. And when I hear that, I just don't understand how anyone, unless you're the Dubrows, because they are rich, honey, and, mazel, congratulations. It is aspirational, and it is true, Like, that's what housewives should be about, right? Like, they are rich, honey. But for the rest of us, $12,000 a month, that is outlandish. That is insane. So I get, it seems like, here's the long and the short of it. I feel that Jen is fronting, I guess that's the word that I'm choosing to use. She's on the show, right? She's a first-year housewife. Now to be a second-year housewife, she probably feels, well, if I want to be on the show, I can't be broke. I have to maintain this image or the standard of living. And so I believe her priorities were wacky. And she, instead of, like what Gina did, she, lived in a casita. She had really bad hair. She certainly didn't do glam. She didn't overspend. She lived within her means and she pulled herself up by her bootstraps. And Jen is doing the exact opposite of that. Jen is allowing her dad and Ryan to literally rescue her. And so this is my irritation with the whole thing, is that, number one, no one's coming to save us except for ourselves. So if people are listening to this and you think to yourself, I wish someone was coming to save me, someone is coming to save you, but spoiler alert, it's you. So I wish teenage me, child me would have known that someone was coming. And hi, it's me. Here she is. And I couldn't be prouder of that. And so I think that Gina comes from this perspective of, she's crawled through mud and broken glass and, got scars and all this stuff from getting her and her children and her ex to a point where they were in a good place. And that took a lot of work. And so Jen is doing the opposite, in my opinion, which is just kind of laying on the couch, hand on her forehead. Oh, woe is me. Somebody help save me from this mess that I've created. I think the second thing is that, before I say the second thing, Ryan literally gave Jen a home and a car. And Jen said in season 3, when it was at the flag football thing, which was super cute, by the way, that she would literally have nothing without Ryan. And so it bothers me as an adult woman with 5 children that she has struggled so much to take charge of her own life, that now this is what's happening. And I think to be an adult woman, we heard Jen say in a Talking Head interview that she's never even owned a credit card. She's never even paid a bill. And so for people who think, wow, Gina should be more kind and more understanding of the situation that Jen's in, right? Because listen, for those of us who did not grow up with money, it's not lost on me how challenging it can be to be a single mother or to be a parent going through a divorce, with 5 children and to struggle. I have immense empathy for that. However, it's Jen's behaviors and her participation in her own demise that she's not acknowledging that is driving Gina crazy. To be honest, it's kind of driving me crazy too, because as someone who has pulled myself up by my bootstraps so many times, whether it be from physical illness or mental health or, financial or career stuff, I'm a fighter and I'm going to fight for my life and fight for the betterment of my life. And it just seems Jen is content to let people save her and get full glam and go to Vegas. And, and Ryan says in this episode, I don't think people realize that I pay for everything. And it's like, okay, here's my concern with that, right? Look at the situation now is that Jen is isolated. She needs Ryan. She's living in his home. And if she didn't, she'd be homeless. She's driving his car. And if she didn't, she'd have no car. And now she's it's a way I feel for control over Jen to be obtained. Now, I'm not saying that that's Ryan's goal. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying is someone who's seen this story before get concerned about her willingness to just go with the flow and not take charge of her stuff. So like, fine, if you've never paid a bill, if you've never had a credit card, okay, fine, do that now. Don't just depend on Ryan, because guess what? Ryan, who knows what's going to happen with them, but I don't know that that's going to last until they die. So if she doesn't do this now and she just leans into Ryan's help, well, she's not helping herself, and therefore she's not helping her kids, and therefore this is likely to happen again. And it's just hard to watch. It's hard to watch. Plus, I think in terms of financial literacy, all people have different levels of competence. And some of it is, when I grew up, this was something that I certainly was not taught, wasn't taught in high school. I've talked to some people on my social media about how this was a course taught when they went to school. But so it varies for, different people in different regions. But I just think that part of being an adult, sometimes that we don't learn in school, is just this general how to be an adult and live your life kind of stuff, which means being financially literate, developing a good credit score, paying your bills, having good credit, having good debt, all these other things that Jen just doesn't seem to value. And I think that when, Gina values it so much, which I obviously relate to, right? I have a personal, Gina personally just is more similar to how I feel. So maybe that's my bias. But I think that it's the lack of acknowledgement from Jen about, like, you're not making smart financial decisions. She just isn't. And so is that Gina's problem? No. But here, in my opinion, of why Gina gets so mad about it, and why I do think that some of Gina's anger is misplaced. So we see these events where Gina and Travis aren't breaking up, but Travis is moving out to, with the goal of their kids. They have 6 kids together. So Gina has 3 and he has 3, right? And they're living in a small home because they can't afford anything else, which I respect so much, because to be a housewife, and Gina has taken a lot of flack from people, a lot of you're poor, you're ugly, your hair is bad, you're this, you're that. But guess what? Gina's doing life right. So Gina's winning, in my opinion. But so Gina is right now saying, because their collective 6 kids are getting older, they need more space and they can't afford a bigger house. And so instead of doing something that's negative for them, they, or will negatively impact them, Gina had Travis move basically down the street. And, so I think my point is that Gina's making very difficult personal decisions to better the lives of her children, even though it's super hard for her personally. And so Jen's lack of awareness, accountability, and showing up in full glam all the time is just pushing Gina over the edge. So, the other thing is that people, I have a lot of survivors, thrivers, that listen to this. Shout out to you all. And as you know, or maybe you don't know, but people who work hard on healing, and it is very hard work, often have a low threshold for BS. I'm one of those people. I really am. I'm one of those people that it's like, if people don't understand how they're architects of their own demise, I just have a hard time with that. I mean, personally, not professionally. Professionally, oh my God, forget it. I'm super empathetic and, all that stuff. But personally, I understand how watching Gina's going to painful lengths to live within her means, and watching Jen be fiscally irresponsible, I think makes her angry and resentful. But I do think some of that is Gina's stuff that she is projecting onto Jen, and that's not fair. But we did get to see on episode 3, there was let me go to my notes here. In episode 3, Jen did admit to having her head in the sand, leading to lack of financial literacy and independence. And I appreciate that Jen acknowledged her missteps by admitting the fact that she over-relied on her partners financially. And again, I'm so opposed to that because that's how control happens. That's how people find themselves in situations in which they're unhappy, is if you're not in control of your life and your finances and you're depending on someone else, well, that's a setup in my opinion. But I didn't like how Gina called Jen a squatter. I didn't like that. It wasn't cool. And I think that that was coming from a place of anger. And so while I don't think it was acceptable or cool at all, I am grateful that she apologized. And I also am grateful that the ladies really did challenge Jen about this from a place of care and concern, because it does need to be challenged. We can love people and be supportive, friends, whatever, but the truest form of love and friendship is honesty from a place of care and concern. And so I think the ladies did that. And I think that Gina apologizing and trying to help Jen, to me, shows Gina's character and is a true act of friendship, in my opinion. All right. So, before we move on from this, is that news broke a few months ago that Jen's fiance, Ryan, and I never know how to say his last name, Ryan B., he was allegedly involved in a gambling and theft scheme. On Watch What Happens Live, Andy asked Jen about this, which I was like, oh, snap. And Jen explained, it's our best friends. That's his association with it. It's not Ryan. And so again, it's like, I worry about I just worry. I think it's like, if these are your best friends, people who are involved in this gambling and theft scheme, it just feels icky. And I hope that they can get themselves in a place where they're prioritizing things that matter instead of money and glam and trips to Vegas. And the last thing I'll say from episode 1 before I move on is that I really liked when Shannon apologized to Gina and took ownership of her missteps. And, Shannon has struggled with that in the past. But what I love about Gina is seeing Shannon take accountability and be like, I'm sorry. Gina has that character who's like, you know what? Yeah, I am proud of you to be living a more honest and authentic life. And I feel like when people who work on healing can see someone genuinely trying, we are happy to give them the benefit of the doubt. And that's, again, the other side of that coin is that that's not what Jen's doing, right? She's leaning into helplessness, but Shannon is not leaning into helplessness. Shannon is leaning into, I'm going to own this. I'm going to take accountability. And I think that's huge. So let's go on. Okay. So here's my takeaway with the financial stuff is that, two things can be true in terms of Jen does deserve compassion, right? Jen deserves compassion. She deserves help and support, but she also needs to make improvements regarding her financial literacy and just overall independence. Although I think Gina personalized and projected, that was kind of hard to watch. I just think sometimes doing the right thing is incredibly painful, but it doesn't give us the right to act outside of our character. And on Watch What Happens Live, Gina said she and Travis are still together and continuing to work through issues, which I just feel like super happy about because I really like Travis and Gina together. I think I just think they're great. So let me move on to Emily. So Emily has become one of my absolute favorite housewives as well for a million reasons. But I appreciated how Emily really discussed the mindfuck of self-image and self-concept, as a woman in the modern world, especially on reality TV, right? Because that's essentially what she meant or what she's talking about, but it's like you don't want to break the fourth wall. But she specifically opened up about becoming obsessive with her gym routine and the havoc that losing weight and people constantly commenting on it can create mentally and emotionally. So I am so proud of Emily for, all bodies are beautiful bodies, right? I think this over fixation on thinness is something societally that we have struggled with for a long time. And, we've seen, especially with the Olympics recently, there's been a lot of really disgusting rhetoric about women's bodies. And if a woman has muscles and broad shoulders, she's a man. But Michael Phelps has, long arms and broad shoulders, and he's the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. And so I'm just seeing this hypocrisy play out before me. But by the way, the Olympics is the best thing I feel like to happen to us as a country right now, because it just reminds me that there are amazing people in this world, amazingly talented people with good character, good sportsmanship. It's the wholesomeness with Snoop Dogg and Flava Flav supporting women that I never thought I would say that out loud. But my goodness, it's just been, chef's kiss. But going back to Emily, I wanted to talk about how it is possible to develop unhealthy dependence on exercise. And in its extreme form, exercise, it can be an addiction. And it can lead people to compulsively exercise in ways that create negative consequences. There's something called orthorexia and exercise addiction. And so what all of that is saying is, so orthorexia specifically is it's a form of disordered eating where you'll eat, but then you feel like you have to exercise for like an unhealthy and ridiculous amount of time because of that food that you put into your body. And so I want to give such kudos to Emily for always authentically discussing these concerns in ways that so many women, myself included, can relate to. Our bodies go through so much. They deserve endless love and respect. And so I'm going to share something. Sometimes I hate being vulnerable, but I will share a little something. So when I was 17, going through cancer, ovarian cancer, for those of you who, I can't imagine that anyone on this podcast doesn't know this, but if you're a new listener, when I was 17, I had ovarian cancer. By the time they found it, it was end stage. I was not supposed to survive. And by the time, because I was so sick, I'm 5'8" and I weighed literally 80 pounds. I looked like I was dying. I felt like I was dying. I was told I was dying. It was a really challenging time. And so I was able to miraculously, doctors still don't understand it, recover and get into remission. And when I did get into remission 2 days after my 18th birthday, my doctor said, you really need to work on gaining weight. And, which I was happy to do, because to me that meant health and I didn't want to be sick anymore. And I was thrilled to do that. Of course, they recommended McDonald's, which, Jesus, the level that doctors know about nutrition is still woefully terrible. But anywho, so I worked on it. I gained some weight. I went to a graduation party because it was that time of year. So I was just graduating from high school, getting ready to go to college. And I went to a graduation party where an adult woman from Hazleton, Pennsylvania, and I'm going to say that for the people listening who know where Hazleton is, I won't say who she is, but people would know who she is. She walked up to me and she said, "My, someone's looking a little pudgy." She said that to an 18-year-old teenager who had just barely by the skin of her teeth survived cancer and is feeling, I'm still pretty much bald. I have very little hair. I have like the short little haircut. I am completely shell-shocked, traumatized. And this is what this woman says to me. And I am 43 years old. And I remember this like it was yesterday. And so the reason that I share this is that when we comment on people's bodies, it stays with them and it causes havoc that is not our place, and it's none of our business. It's none of our business. And for a long time, I struggled with my body image. I have a lot of scars and I have a lot of, my stomach, it was cut from pubic bone to above my belly button. I have, multiple hysterectomy scars, port scars. I have, my body has been through war, literally. And, when I started going through therapy, I just started realizing, why am I being so hard on myself? I am a rock star. My body has gotten me through war, not once, not twice, like several times. So let me start loving and appreciating my body for all the things that it's carried me through. So people listening to this, please hear what I'm saying. And start to talk to yourself and your body in ways that are respectful and loving and kind. Please, can we start doing this? So that is my PSA. All right. So let's see. Let me get to... Okay, so the Sutton crossover was the most amazing. I love Sutton, and I just love a Housewives crossover. It was like some sort of Housewives fever dream, and I just loved it. So, but here Katie starts planting the seed for another storyline of Heather is not nice to me. And it's like, at this point, no duh, right? Like, no doy. Heather is wealthy, okay? You can't reach that level of wealth and to be that part of society and to not have some sort of ego or elitism. Like, it's not... Like, psychologically speaking, there are very few people who can do that. I know that, there are some celebrities who are known for, being super down to earth, like Tom Hanks. He drives a Prius, So I think that, there's different personality styles and it happens differently. But it's like, yeah, I mean, sometimes Heather's rude. She's sometimes elitist. Like, yeah, no duh. So here, now let's go into episode 4. Here we have the feud that nobody saw coming, which was newbie Katie and Heather Dubrow. So let me give you the long and short of... Sorry, I don't know what is happening with my voice. Let me give you the long and short of it. A few months ago, we saw on social media, there was this picture of Heather and Terry Dubrow at Disney World, and there was all this buzz about how they called paparazzi and they staged these pictures following bad press they received, which I'm not sure exactly what the press was. I think it was something having to do with maybe Terry cheating. Allegedly, I don't think he did that, or, I don't know what happened, but Terry seems like a great husband and a great guy. But anyway, some bad press was received and these pictures came out, and everyone on social media, I remember, trolled them so relentlessly because they looked very staged. They did. It was Terry, like, holding her, by the waist, and her looking up and like pointing to a bird or something, and whatever. So Katie decides to make this her storyline, which, this is either going to make her or it's going to break her. And if I'm being honest, to be a newbie housewife and to think about going up against Heather, I don't know that that's a wise decision for Katie. Now, will it be good TV? Sure, it will be. But, some housewives in the past who went up against Heather were one and done. So, we'll see. Katie claims that her dear friend is in charge of all paparazzi, which I didn't know that was a thing, but I have had people in my DMs and listeners say that there are some podcasts that talk about it, that the way paparazzi is structured now, that is accurate. So Katie shows this like weak little screenshot of claiming she sent the screenshot to her, quote, dear friend, and she kept saying dear friend, which I always find hilarious when people preface something like to try to make it more relevant or more important. So she shows this screenshot, producers did, which I loved, that, of her saying, did Terry and Heather call paparazzi and fake this? And it was just him responding, yes. That's it. That's all it was. And I just thought, oy, that's weak. And the most surprising thing about this all is that Gina confirms it, reporting that she also knew that Heather did this, and cut to everyone on the cast also being like, yeah, Heather lied. She totally called the paparazzi, like whatever. So as Gina confronts Katie about this, it really led to something that blew my mind, which is Katie throws Cynthia Bailey under the bus in some sort of Housewives crossover fever dream, fourth wall breaking moment. And I will tell you, Cynthia Bailey is my all-time favorite housewife, and I don't stan anyone except for Cynthia. So do not come for my queen. Don't come for Queen Cynthia. But allegedly, Cynthia told Katie that Heather was grilling her about Katie, like, who is she? Who's this person? Blah, blah, blah. And so Katie took this to be evidence to support her claim that at a party, Heather looked at her and just completely ignored her. I just am like, this is so stupid. This might be the dumbest storyline I've ever seen in my life, because who cares? Who cares? Number one. Here's the thing, and Katie made some relevant points, like about what Cynthia said and the timeline of it and all that, but like, I do not like that my queen had to take a hit. And I also wonder how this impacted Cynthia and Heather's relationship. I don't like that either. So, to me, Katie is definitely, it's messy. It's a little tacky, but, I don't know. If the truth is on her side, then I'm here for it. And so, of course, at Katie's golf event, which, by the way, fun fact, I grew up in a family of golfers. I love golf. I'm good at golf. I play golf. And this was like a party that I could totally get behind. And I was so upset because if I had been there, I would have won those Prada sunglasses. I mean, Emily was good and Gina was pretty good. It shocked me how bad Katie was, considering like her whole life is like her husband's like a golf pro, or I don't know if he played on the tour or whatever, but anyway, they're like a golf family and she's surprisingly really bad at it. But I just wanted to share that fun fact. My grandfather always said that I broke his heart by not going into into women's golf. But nevertheless, Tamara worked overtime. Tamara, here's the thing. She's a good housewife. But I think that her housewife persona is work, and I think she's a totally different person off the show. I think off the show, she likes to be in Big Bear. She likes to be away from paparazzi. She likes to do her own thing. And on the show, she does what she's there to do, which is stir the pot. So she tells Heather about the situation. Heather says, show me the proof. Producers did. And then we get to the confrontation about Heather, or between Heather and Katie. Now, here's what I'm going to say about this. I post, for those of you who don't know, I post my clinical interpretations in bite-sized chunks on my Instagram at Your Bish Therapist. So some of what I talk about on the podcast, you can read on my Instagram. And what I love about my Instagram is that I have a community of people who, are lovely and who they have differences of opinion, and we love to talk about that. So what I'm about to say is my perspective on the situation, but I was talking with a friend of mine on DM. She's also a therapist, shout out. And she had a completely different take on it. And I said, just to be clear, when I give these takes, this doesn't mean I'm right. This is me saying this is what I think. I could be totally wrong. I'm not 100% right all the time, and I don't know these people. So these are my best clinical interpretations and insights. But what I love is I think our differences of opinion and perspective is what makes the world so wonderful and beautiful and fascinating. And, what was really special to me on my Instagram is this woman and I, we had this, lovely discussion, and she said her piece and I said mine. But at the end of the day, we were both like, wow, thanks. I feel like I learned so much from this. And, she went on to tell me that she really felt like her inner child was heard, because it is so hard for people today to agree to disagree or to respectfully disagree. And so I just, I want to share that for people listening. If you disagree, great. I love differences of opinion. I'm not saying this is right, but this was my interpretation of what I saw with Heather. I observed Heather, in my opinion, become quietly and politely enraged. To me, she behaved in ways that made her look like a mean girl, because I am sensitive to people who have like a seething underlying anger, but they're trying to mask it, right? That's my stuff. In my opinion, I saw Heather, right? Her mask slipped a little bit and she was like pointing like ferociously, and her body language was so aggressive. And to me, my observation was that she was trying to be intimidating and threatening. And I didn't like that. I mean, what we do when we get mad says so much about our character. And so for such a silly accusation, why all the anger? I mean, again, if Heather is innocent and didn't really do this, okay, then I could understand it. But and then we cut to Heather's talking head, and it shows that she's also like, she would have been a great lawyer. She brought up some strong points about Katie in her talking head, and she went on Watch What Happens Live. And Heather said, we've seen the prosecution, now we need to see the defense, which teases the fact that this is going to be an ongoing feud all season. And what I noticed is on Watch What Happens Live, Heather took every opportunity to malign Katie's character, which I also just think is interesting, right? Because if you have truth on your side, I don't know. To me, it seemed a little bit like of an overreaction. And then Heather's response to me seemed combative and defensive, which to me, when people are defensive, it's usually there's some sort of process going on for them. They're embarrassed. They're trying to cover something up. There could be a million reasons. But when Heather quipped, enjoy the dom, I just like, literally, this is how my brain works. I have like an encyclopedia of housewives in my brain. I remembered that moment where Kelly Kaloran Ben-Simone told Bethany Frankel on Real Housewives of New York, this was a long time ago, she used her hands to gesture to say, I'm up here and you're down here. We are not the same, right? And to me, that was Heather's way of saying that, right? Like, I brought you Dom, I'm rich, you ain't, and I'm up here and you're down here. Okay. So I think my point is there's a lot of ego in Heather's response, which to me is just not a good look. I'm not a huge fan of giant ego. But again, when you get to that level of success, like Terry is a doctor and plastic surgeon, and they're so important in the community, like, yeah, there's going to be ego there. But to me, this was too much ego for the situation. It didn't seem congruent, if that makes sense. So Katie maintained her respect, kindness, and self-control. And in my opinion, that's what people do when they have truth on their side. But TBD. Okay. Last thing I'm going to mention is we get to see the behind the scenes drama of what happened between Vicky, Tamara, and Shannon and their now defunct Tres Amigas variety show. So Tamara stated on multiple times on numerous platforms that she no longer wanted to do the show because she felt it was in poor taste, number one, and wasn't a healthy environment for Shannon following her DUI and subsequent alcohol treatment. Okay. I've listened to the Two Teas in a Pod podcast with Tamara and Teddy. I've listened to Tamara talk about this multiple times. I've seen her post about this, right? She maintains that this is her truth. She claims that Vicky doesn't care about Shannon and that Vicky adamantly demanded the show must go on. And so in the 4th episode, we watch a scene where Vicky and Shannon discuss this. And here is what, oh my God, this annoyed me so much. So we watch a scene where Vicky walks in reporting that she was just in the hospital for a staph infection, and she left the hospital against medical advice because she is, quote, busy and has things to do, which means filming. Okay. Now, the grossest part of this is Vicky says to her, "It's oozing. Would you like to come in the bathroom and see it?" And so as someone who has 1 million medical problems, I am basically a doctor. I am very well versed in all things medical, super weird, not joking, have helped people diagnose things that their doctors missed, etc. Okay. So after the scene, I have a clear interpretation of what's happening. Okay. And I will say I am not a Vicky fan. Never been. I think she's very self-focused and I just don't vibe with her. Leaving a hospital AMA with a staph infection that is actively oozing is dangerous, could be life-threatening to her, and could be life-threatening to somebody else because staph, when it's oozing, is contagious. Google it, talk to a nurse, talk to a doctor. I promise you that is the truth. So in my opinion, Vicky is this is a poor decision for Vicky. At best, and at worst, it could be life-threatening. So in my opinion, Vicky is not making healthy decisions for herself. She is clearly prioritizing fame and work over health and self-care, and hustling culture is often used by people to avoid and distract from life stressors and painful emotions. So what I'm saying is I think Vicky does this whole, I gotta work, always working, she does this thing where it's like, she's sad and lonely and she wants to distract herself from her life, and whatever, that's my feeling on it. But whatever the cause, hustling to the point that you have a staph infection and you're leaving to work is no badge of honor, and it's quite stupid. So Vicky appears to be encouraging Shannon to make unhealthy decisions as a result of Vicky's stuff, and I believe Shannon's going along with it because she needs the money. She feels desperate, and Tamara removing herself from the equation makes Shannon more vulnerable, in my opinion, because Shannon feels like now that Tamara's gone, she needs Vicky. She needs allies. And I also believe that Vicky maligning Tamara is her way of maintaining control over Shannon to secure the future of the Dos Amigas, because that is literally all that Vicky cares about. So either way, Shannon's an adult, and I hope she does truly what is best for her. All right. This is going to be the end of this episode for me today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Please remember to take care of yourselves and each other. Amen. Disclaimer: posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Production, or any other television network. The information in YBT Podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT Podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.